Hi everybody, this is Johnny. I'm going to be going through CalTPA Cycle 2, the first rubric, 2.1. This one's all about planning. So let's read the essential question. How does the candidate's learning segment plan provide appropriate content-specific and, if appropriate, ELD learning goals and assessments that offer multiple ways for all students to demonstrate knowledge? So I've highlighted the things that matter. Let's take them apart. The two main things that matter are your learning goals and your assessments. But you want to give attention to, if at all possible, your ELD assessments and goals as well, and give good attention to the multiple ways for students to show what they know and can do. All right? So that's the big idea behind this particular rubric. Each one of these levels, Level 1, Level 2, Level 3, Level 4, Level 5, will describe those things, but Level 3 is the starting place. So let's get started with Level 3. What's important about Level 3 is that's the starting point for the assessor as well. The assessor will look at your work and see if you meet these goals. And the most important thing here is this part down here. You must meet all Level 3 requirements. Missing any one of these will move you down to a Level 2. Now, the complicated thing here is this is a very big block of text. All Level 3 has many things in it. So what we're going to be doing here is taking it apart so you see all the requirements built into Level 3. All right, so we're going to deconstruct it a bit. And what helps is to think about each one of these descriptors in terms of blocks. This is the first block, the second block, the third block, and there's a fourth block down here. And what we want to do is think about each one of these in terms of this is the first block, and then we think about the second block, the third block, and then the fourth block. Okay? So let's take apart the first block, and I'm going to highlight the things that are the absolutes. So when you see the word musts, everything underneath the word must is something that is one of the requirements. So the first statement in this first block, candidate's learning segment includes manageable, content-specific, and if appropriate, ELD learning goals that clearly build on students' prior content knowledge. Modeling or scaffolding strategies are clearly described. You can see I've highlighted the essential pieces of that first block. Let's look at it over here. First must, it must be manageable, reasonable goals for 3 to 5 lessons. That means the scope, you don't want to be trying to do too much in those 3 to 5 lessons, but also too little. It also has to follow naturally from what's been taught before. The second must, it must be content specific, it must be at the heart of the subject matter. If you're doing math, it should be about problem solving, maybe not just, it can't just be word problems that have to do with science that you happen to be studying science. If it's literacy, you should be doing things around reading and writing. ELD, I'm going to suggest that you do and give attention to ELD no matter whether you're doing math or literacy. And the next one, build on students' prior knowledge. This means clearly connect to the things that have been learned before. If your 3 to 5 lessons are in a unit, there's most likely to have been a few lessons beforehand that you're referring to, but also students' prior learning within the year, before the year, last year's learning, but also things they might know about that come from their home circumstance. The next must clearly set out models and scaffolds to support student learning. All right? So you can see that in this first block, there are 5 different things you have to give attention to. So think of this as like a checklist that you can move through to help make sure you get at least to Level 3. I'm going to the next block now. Candidate clearly identifies multiple kinds of evidence they will look for to determine that students meet the learning goals and the assessments they will use to make this determination. Okay? So you want to this is where you're setting out your assessments. And there are 3 basic kinds of assessments in CalTPA 2, Cycle 2, that matter. The informal assessment, the formal assessment, and the student self-assessment. We'll talk more about those as we go along. Okay, so what I suggest, this is the must. Must describe your evidence. Okay, so what are you looking for to show that kids know and are able to do the things you're setting out in your learning goals? You should name them. Name, say, these are my formal assessments. My informal assessments along the way, I will be doing these things. And the self-assessments will happen here, here, and here during my closure or just before we begin a learning segment. All right? You want to be describing all 3 of these. All right, so that's a must. Let's go to the next block. Learning segments include learning activities that are appropriately supporting, engaging, or challenging for students. All right? So the reason they have this here, so let's make sure we have the words supporting, engaging, and challenging. Do set out something in particular that's not obvious in this text, so I'll explain it in a moment. And you also need to talk about your grouping, right? So if we think about the must, the learning activities, okay, they must show how you're engaging students in ways that move their learning. Do and include activities and approaches that support the range of students in your class. So this is what I was alluding to a moment ago. When it says supporting, engaging, and challenging, think about your focus students for cycle 1. How are you setting out learning activities that address the range and differences in your kids as well? All right? And a big idea across all of this will always be higher order thinking skills. All right? The one thing I didn't put here is that you really do need to think about setting out grouping strategies. So do put another one here, and let's think about this one as grouping, okay? Make sure I can do this right. Grouping needs to happen too. So include that one too. So you can see under that must, you've got 2 different ones. All right. Okay, let's go to the last box. This last piece is content-specific instructional strategies. 2 big words, in adaptations and accommodations that will assist students to reach learning goals. And here's the other part, in multiple ways. That goes to the big point under this particular rubric. So let's go to the musts. Okay. Your lessons should give students the opportunity to show their learning in more than one way. Think about different approaches to any one assessment. Okay. So can they perform it? Can they make a project around it? Can they make an essay around it? Think about the different ways they may do such things. Okay. One thing that would strengthen this is about student choice, and that will come up in a later level. Now I've talked through level 3. If we look now, we can see that within level 3, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 things you need to make sure you have happen. So make yourself a list, a checklist, and make sure you've done those 9 things. And remember again, you want to do all of those things in order to succeed and move on beyond level 3 if you want to. But missing any one significantly will move you to level 2. Let's take this a little further. Let's be aspirational, and let's look at what level 4 looks like. This is what level 4 looks like. Okay, taking all of what we set out for level 3 and taking it to another level. So you can see there's one block here, and my suggestion for you is to aim for level 4 because it takes a lot of work to get to level 3, but sometimes it takes just a bit more, not too much more, to move yourself to a level 4. So reach for it if you can. Level 4, candidates' instruction and assessment are purposefully chosen and planned to develop, and here's the key part, deep understanding of content through active learning, product process performance, and academic language. So these 2 pieces matter, active learning and a focus on academic language as well. Okay, and you're supporting students in multiple ways. This is again trying to get to all of your students. All right, and it's got to be content specific and give attention to ELD again. So there's a lot of bits and pieces in here, but the big things in here are about making sure that you're going deeper with the learning, and also you're giving attention to academic language and ELD along the way. So let's look at the musts. Okay, musts. Deep understanding. You want to focus your planning on rich engagement. This goes back to the active learning piece. All right, you're not doing something that's kids memorizing things. You're actually asking them to work through deep questions and problems and have give them opportunities to engage in varied, interesting ways through projects or writing or performance, all those different things, right? So my suggestions here, in math, you want to be working around problem solving, okay? That's a way to get to deeper understanding, deep learning. In literacy, think about critical discussions of the text, not just what happened in the texts that you're reading with the kids, but also why and what the author was doing, the author's purpose, okay, making connections across within the text and across the text. You want to go for the rich stuff. So critical discussion and reflection on texts. Make plain reference, and this is a practical one, make plain reference to work towards higher order thinking skills. So in your planning, name it. So I'm doing this activity because I want to get to a deeper place with my students. Whatever particular ideas around higher order thinking you want to name as well. So this is the first one, deep understanding. The second one, students have more than one way to engage and show their learning. That's the second requirement for this one. And the third one is organize ELD instruction to push for deep understanding, not superficial. Okay, so make sure ELD is not just about getting the words that matter, but showing the depth of language in English that's necessary, or conveying that to your kids while you're teaching. All right? So you can see for this one, to get a level 4, there's 3 things to pay attention to. That's your checklist. And to be highly aspirational, let's go ahead and see what number 5, level 5 says. All right? So here is level 5. All right, and reading through it, it says all of level 3 and 4. That makes good sense. Plus, candidates' plan includes individualized and whole class adaptations and accommodations that are purposely and clearly drawn from the classroom context, resulting in, and here's their big piece, an inclusive learning environment. That's what you're really trying to move towards with level 5. Okay? Students have opportunity to independently facilitate their own work in the whole class, in groups of students, in pairs, or individually. All right, so let's take this one apart. The musts. Okay. First must, considerations for individuals, whole class. Okay. So considerations for individuals and whole class considerations. So you're talking about the class as a whole, some ways in which the class shares in the ways they do things and know things, but also you're giving particular attention and you're writing it out why you're giving certain kinds of attention to some students. All right? But this one's probably the more important one for this one. Describe how students are working together to involve everyone. So think about this as a community of learners. There's some kind of project, performance, or something that the kids are engaged in small groups, or the whole class, where the learning is being shared and purposeful that way. And it's clear that everybody has a role, and everybody's encouraging every other person in the classroom to be involved in a worthwhile way. So, together to involve everyone in a rich learning experience. The next one, the third one, vary the ways students approach the learning. So consider independent learning, shared learning, whole class learning, and then this is probably the piece that moves it really to a 5, having students have some ownership over these approaches, okay, making choices for themselves. So for level 5, you want to have considerations for individuals and whole class. So it's 1, 2, describe how students are involved together. 3, vary the ways you approach the ways students are able to approach the learning. So level 5, there are 3 bullet points here. So 3 things you need to consider. And if we go down to the bottom here, you will see that these are the things that are sources of evidence. Okay. So you'll see here that you can say in the written narrative, contextual information, your learning segment template where you set out your lessons themselves. You're going to be describing each of your assessments. This is for all of this first rubric, and then you're going to include each of your assessments and rubrics. Now this is important here. Don't miss this one. It says blank copy of informal assessment. Don't forget that each one of the assessments has to have a rubric. Okay? Informal assessment and rubric, student self-assessment and rubric, and then formal assessment and rubric. So these are all the ways in which you're going to show how well you've done by cycle 2, rubric 2.1. All right, now I'm going to move on to the next rubric, 2.2.